Hello, Bitcoin Basics listeners. Thank you for joining us. So what we have here is a series that I did for a local radio station in New Zealand called Fix the Money, Fix the World. Some of you might recognize that phrase. And what I've done is just gone through basic highlights of what's happening in the economy and how it actually affects the everyday person. So we've just uploaded those to the Bitcoin Basics podcast. Thank you, Gordon, for doing that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
The following podcast is a live recording of a radio show first broadcast by FreshFM with assistance from New Zealand On Air. FreshFM is a community access media station based in Te Tauihu, the top of the South Island, New Zealand.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Faris Mali with Fix the Money, Fix the World, coming to you Monday mornings on FreshFM. So today we're actually going to be talking about oil. Now, why are we talking about oil? Well, it is the world's largest, most traded commodity, and it has been in the news recently. We've had some interesting topics come up in the news about oil, and it is involved in all parts of our daily lives. It's in a lot of products that we probably don't realize, but I'm talking about it today because recently we've had what we call climate activists, inverted commas, who have been protesting oil, specifically the research and exploration for new oil, which we'll talk about later. And they're wearing t-shirts that read "Just Stop Oil" as they vandalize art objects, which include Vincent van Gogh's sunflowers and several other high-profile objects in museums in Europe. So what's been happening is they've been walking in, they've glued themselves to a wall, so glued their hands to a wall and poured, in one case, a can of soup on these. I saw another one where they put mashed potatoes on these paintings, and these are worth or valued at several millions, hundreds of millions of dollars even. And their t-shirts just read "Just Stop Oil." And that's essentially the message they're trying to come across is we need to live in a world without oil, I believe. But we need to understand oil a bit more because there's a lot more to oil than just pumping out of a gas station and putting it into your car. So you may have heard me reference crude oil on this show before. So crude oil is basically oil as we get it out of the ground. That's crude oil. Once oil comes out of the ground, and there's two types of oil that you may have come across, U.S. crude and Brent. Brent is the stuff that they use in the UK. U.S. crude is in the U.S., and it's actually a different type of oil that serves different purposes. I won't go into that, but I will link to someone called Art Berman, who this is his life, and he's on a lot of podcasts and explains oil very well. So once we get oil out of the ground, we send it to a refinery. So a refinery will separate the oil into a lot of different usable petroleum products. So I'm going to use the word petroleum just to say it's in reference to everything that comes out of a barrel of oil. So if we look at a barrel of oil, and 20% of that barrel will be used for gasoline. So when I say gasoline, it's not just the gas, it's what actually goes into a car to fuel a car or vehicles. So that's for transportation, a gasoline. On top of that, there's distillates. So distillates make up about 12.5% of each barrel. So distillates will include diesel fuel, heating oil, jet fuel, petrochemical feedstocks, lubricating oils, and asphalt. So asphalt for putting into new roads. Then we have 3.5%, which is jet fuel. And there's 6.3%, which are other products. So I'll just go through that again. So when we think of a barrel of oil, that barrel of oil goes to a refinery. That oil is then separated and different products will come out of it. Gasoline, which we use for transport, distillates, diesel fuel, heating oil, those ones that I mentioned, jet fuel, and other products. Now, those other products actually include different gases: propane, butane, LPG, gasoline, aviation gasoline, residual fuel for ocean ships. There's a lot that we use for oil, and refineries, they don't just refine oil, they actually refine other materials as well. One of the main things that oil actually is used in is plastics. So synthetic rubbers, for example, if you think of carpeting and clothing, unless you are wearing clothing that is 100% wool or cotton, most clothing will actually contain petroleum products. So think about that. If you are not wearing 100% wool or cotton, the clothing that you're buying will contain some petroleum in it. Synthetic rugs. So again, if it's not 100% wool based, then most rugs that we see commercially these days actually will have nylon or olefin in them, which is a petroleum product. Cosmetics. This is a huge billion-dollar industry. So paraffin wax is a petroleum product. Paraffin wax is the main petroleum product used because it has a melting point equal to the temperature of the human body. This is a huge part of what lipstick is. So this is why they use this in cosmetics, because the melting point is the same as a human body. So when you apply lipstick to your skin, that's why it smears. Because if it was too hard, it wouldn't smear. So paraffin wax, which is petroleum-based, is huge in the cosmetic industry. If you're buying shampoo or conditioner, that plastic bottle is petroleum. So medications, there's petroleum and aspirin. Solar panels, you might think that, hey, I'm going off-grid, I'm going solar. Well, the solar cells contain petroleum-based plastics. Dentures and toothpaste, these too have petroleum in it. And this a list goes on. CDs, DVDs, tires, crayons, paper cups, wax paper, computer components. All these things that I've mentioned actually contain petroleum in them. So when someone walks up to a Van Gogh painting that says "Stop Oil," and they're wearing a T-shirt which does not appear to be wool, they're wearing jewelry, they have dyed their hair, and unless it's 100% organic dye, they're actually using oil in what they are wearing. They had shoes on that had rubber in them that definitely had oil in them. So they're wearing petroleum-based products as they are protesting the use of petroleum. So I'm not criticizing them personally. Well, I guess I am. But the point I'm trying to make is, what exactly are we protesting? Is it the use of oil itself? Is it the way we extract oil? We kind of need to understand that, hey, we are a petroleum-based society. And we have made good grounds as to mitigating how much of it we use. And we're going to talk about electric vehicles later. But we need to understand that if you walk into a supermarket that does not have any petroleum products in it, that will be bare. So this is what we need to understand is petroleum products are a huge part of our everyday lives. All right, I'm going to take a quick break here. So I am going to play a song. This is Call My Name by Troy Kingy. And this is a special shout out to a good friend of mine, Sam, who listens to my show. And I asked him what music should I be playing, because I'm sure you've probably had enough of Aussie rock. So Sam, this one's for you. That was Call My Name by Troy Kingy. And if you are joining us, this is Fix the Money, Fix the World, coming to you Monday mornings on Fresh FM. And today we've been talking about oil and just the fact that petroleum is in more products than just filling up your petrol tank in your car. And we had some interesting developments take place recently with protesters around the world, the Just Stop Oil movement. And we're talking about how important petroleum is in our daily lives. So again, this is not an indictment or encouragement of anything. It's just we need to understand that we are not in a place right now where we can just simply stop oil, inverted commas, because it is ingrained in everything that we do. Now, one of the things I remember hearing about was plastic bags. So if we look at plastic bags, and we've done a lot to curb the use of plastic bags, but when the price of oil went down in 2009 after the financial crisis, and happened again in the 2020 COVID outbreak, what happens is there are companies out there that recycle plastic bags. They collect them and clean them and then sell them again. Well, those businesses suffered when the price of oil was low because they could not resell those at a profit or even break even, because it was just cheaper for companies to buy the raw material, as in petroleum, and create new plastic bags. So when price of oil is cheap, what it's actually doing is it's discouraging people from looking for alternatives. So we saw the sale of EVs go up recently as the price of oil goes up. So if you're buying something at the petrol station, you're buying oil and you're seeing the prices going up and thinking, holy cow, I might want to look at an alternative. But if the price of oil is low, then you're not going to bother about that. So cheap oil is probably a disincentive for people to look for alternatives. So when the price of oil goes up, we look at alternatives. Now, we then actually, and transportation is key. So I mentioned before the percentages of, if you look at a barrel of oil, where does it all go? Well, what industries does it go into from there? So each barrel of oil, about 60%, it's actually 60% minimum, will go towards transportation. Now, when you think about it, this is energy to propel a car or a vehicle. That's all it's doing. It's just being burnt. If it's going into manufacturing, I am looking at a mouse, I'm looking at a keyboard, I'm looking at this mixer. These are things that are going to stay here tomorrow. So oil has actually gone into manufacture these. They've got a 2, 3, 4 year lifespan. They're here to stay. And at the end of it, a lot of these components can be recycled. With transportation, that's it. There is no product. It's just burnt for propulsion. So the majority of oil that we are using today, majority of petroleum that we are using today is there to get burnt in transportation. So this is where EVs, and I think we'll actually do a separate episode for EVs because it will be something in and of itself. This is where EVs have come to curb the demand for transportation. So just because everyone's going to buy an electric car, let's argument's sake, everyone owns an electric car, it doesn't mean there's no oil in the world. You saw the list of things I mentioned before where they all need oil. Now, one of the interesting things that we have is oil discovery and exploration. So let's say you are running an oil company and this is 2008, the financial crisis is happening. People get unemployed. So unemployment rate is going up. Firms are going down. People are suffering financially. What is it they're not going to do? They're not going to travel. They're not going to go out and buy a new car. They're not going to be driving to work. The demand for oil is going to drop. And this is exactly what happened in the price of oil. So we saw in 2008 that the price of oil went from $150 U.S. crude, so U.S. $150 per barrel for U.S. crude, and it dropped from August 2008 to a low in October. It went from $150 to $35. That was the price of oil. So say you're running a petroleum company and your job is to sell oil. And then the financial crisis hits in 2008. Now, the price of oil in the financial crisis before the financial crisis, got up to $150 per barrel. So that's U.S. crude, $150 per barrel. The demand for oil dropped. Why did it drop? Because people were being laid off, which means they're buying less material things that have petroleum in them. They're not driving to work every day, so you need less oil, petrol for their car. And people aren't going to be traveling. So the demand for oil dropped. In the course of a few months, it went from $150 to $35 per barrel of oil. Now, if you're running that company, what's the first thing you're actually going to stop doing? One is you're going to stop spending money on what's called oil exploration and discovery, which means you're not going to be paying engineers all these people to go out and find new sources of oil. So we have people traveling the world looking for new sources of oil, buying land rights, making deals with governments to basically say, we want the oil under your ground. You don't need new oil when people aren't buying oil. So oil exploration and discovery is the first thing as a business that gets stopped. Then price of oil comes down, and what you then do is you're selling your reserves. So what we have as a business owner, the oil reserves that you already have in place, you're selling those. You are not going to bother trying to find more oil because the price is too cheap. Now, what happens then over the next year or two is as you start to go through that oil, you then say, okay, we are running out of reserves. We need new oil. So what you then do is send people out to find new reserves. Now, what can happen at the same time is, say, the economy picks back up, which it did, and then people demand oil. So what's happening is the supply is picking up, the demand is going down. And in our first episode, we talked about supply and demand. If demand goes up and supply comes down, prices go up. So why am I bringing this up today? Because we're in a place now where the demand for oil is okay. It's not great. But we're also seeing that in America, they are now selling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, why is that important? So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is basically a stockpile of petroleum in the United States. And this is directly off of the Energy's website. I'll read this out. As a member of the IEA, the International Energy Agency, the United States is obligated to maintain stocks of crude oil and petroleum products, both public and private, to provide at least 90 days of U.S. net import protection. As net imports of crude oil and petroleum products into the United States continue to decline, this requirement can be met with lower SPR inventory levels. So what that basically means is that we're keeping 90 days worth of petroleum in the country, because if something happens and we cannot import oil, we have 90 days worth. So this was designed in case of war or emergencies where supply chains are completely cut off and you cannot bring oil. You can't bring oil in. Now, America's actually still in a place where they can bring oil in, but they have been selling, since 2020, they've been selling the SPR oil. And they are now at the oil in stockpile in the U.S. is at the lowest levels since 1984. Why is that? Well, this is an opinion I'm about to present. So it's one that I've read. It's not my own, but I agree with it, is when you're paying for oil and it's expensive and life is expensive, you therefore are an unhappy consumer and you blame the government. So in the United States, we are a week away from the midterm elections. This is where they vote for the Senate and the House. So it's everyone basically except the White House. It's huge elections. And as the opinion goes, they are selling oil to bring down the price of oil leading into the elections because they don't want the price of oil to keep going up because it's bad news for the administration. So leading into the election, they're selling oil. After the election, they're going to stop doing that, which means they're going to stop supplying the market. Now, the other thing I mentioned before was the oil discovery and exploration. So let's say economy picks up and we need more oil. People are driving more. People are buying more products that have petroleum in them. Well, the thing is there's an 18-month lag from discovery to the Bowser. What does that mean? So say you're running that petroleum company. Okay, we need more oil. We're running out of our reserves as a private company. We need to find more sources. By the time you actually find where is there oil, you negotiate with those governments, you extract that crude oil, and then it's refined. It will take 18 months from finding that oil, getting it to the Bowser. In those 18 months, what's happening? You're going through your supply of petroleum. So this is why we can see petroleum in this situation, the price per barrel just shoot up because we are working through fixed supply. There's no new supply coming in. All right, and now there's more things going on in the world, which are quite interesting. So I'm going to play a clip. I came across this on Twitter. This is off of, and I'll link to it. So this is a representative from America talking to the heads of the large commercial banks in the United States. And this is Representative Rashida Tlaib and the response will be from JP Morgan, who was the CEO of JP Morgan's. Sorry, I may have missaid that. So what we're going to hear now, the female voice you're going to be hearing is Representative Rashida Tlaib, and this is a oversight of U.S. Banks Committee, and the male respondent is Jamie Dimon, who was the CEO of JP Morgan Bank. So I am just going to play this now.
You have all committed, as you all know, to transition the emissions from lending and investment activities to align with pathways to net zero in 2050. Do you know what the International Energy Agency has said is required to meet our global 2050 net zero targets of limiting global temperature rise to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.5 degrees Celsius? So no new fossil fuel production starting today. That's like zero. So I would like to ask all of you and go down the list, because again, you all have agreed to doing this. Please answer with a simple yes or no. Does your bank have a policy against funding new oil and gas products? Mr. Diamond.
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir, you know what? Everybody that got relief from student loans has a bank account with your bank should probably take out their account and close their account. The fact that you're not even there to help relieve many of the folks that are in debt, extreme debt because of student loan debt, and you're out there criticizing it.
All right, that was a somewhat bewildering exchange. So first of all, the elected official there, the Net Zero 2050 reference, that is a United Nations initiative to cutting greenhouse gas emissions to as close to 0% as possible. So she was asking all the big banks there, will you stop funding research and discovery of fossil fuels? And Jamie Dimon, who's been around for a very long time and was heavily involved in the 2008 bailout, he said, no, that's a road to hell to America. So Jamie Dimon is someone you won't find me agreeing with at all. I wouldn't even say often. But with this statement, what is he actually saying? He's saying essentially that, yes, fossil fuel production is a huge part of the American economy. And it's not just, okay, let's put petrol in our cars. And he's saying that refineries do a lot more than just refine petroleum. As we've looked at, there are so many products involved. So with what this representative was saying, I don't know how she tied it to student loans. She mispronounced Celsius. So there's quite some strange things going on there. And it just seems to me like what we're going through now is we have this knee-jerk reaction to all of a sudden oil is bad. Let's get rid of it, without understanding just how ingrained it is in so much that we do as consumers. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe that what we actually need to look at is how do we decrease our dependency on transportation. So we are going to do a whole episode on electronic vehicles. So electronic vehicle, and I'll just do a precursor here. So EVs kind of make sense in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, where this show's based, 80% of the energy in New Zealand is from renewable sources. So a lot of that's hydro dams. Most commutes for Kiwis are quite short. The average commute is 22 kilometers a day. So an EV that can, give you, like I know someone who drives a hybrid where her daily commute is 50 kilometers a day, and that she gets 50 Ks out of the battery life in her car, and then she plugs it in when she gets home. If she's doing a longer trip, then she uses the petrol part of the hybrid. I myself actually do drive an EV, and the reason I did that was because I actually am a heavy commuter. On a weekly basis, I'd be doing 500 kilometers, and I figured out that over the next 4 years, that was going to cost me around $20,000. This was when the price of oil was almost half of what it is now. So for me, it was purely financial. I'm saving on filling up the car with oil. I'm saving on petrol. Now, that works well in New Zealand because our electricity is quite low. It is renewable, and we don't really get blackouts. Ironically, in California, where you do get this movement for EVs started with Tesla, California is 47% reliant on natural gas. Natural gas is a non-renewable fossil fuel. And California's average commute is 40 kilometers. Now, electric cars there make sense because in your commute, you're not paying for petrol, but they are adding to what is already an overloaded electrical grid. So even though you're not paying for petrol, when you go home and plug that car at home, the electricity generated to charge your car, even though it's minimal, is still coming from a fossil fuel. So as I said, it's just an introduction. So I think we will devote an entire episode to the economics of EVs versus the internal combustion engine. But it seems that we're now, as a society, moving to oil is dirty, let's get rid of it, without really understanding just how much involved it is in our everyday lives. And I'm not here to promote oil. I am a minimalist. I don't like buying products simply because of the time and effort it takes to look after the products. I do believe that the more you have, the more it owns you. I really don't like going to petrol stations because I can't tolerate the smell. I actually used to even have a push mower simply because I just don't like the smell of fuel. It just gives me a headache. That's my personal preference. But the fact is, we are in this transition now where I think we're just going way too far in one side, say, get rid of oil. You can't. And the irony of this is that oil was actually seen as a clean and safe alternative. Now, if you have not seen the film The Heart of the Sea, I recommend you see it. It's based on the story of of Moby Dick. And what it is it's basically telling that story. And there's a really cool scene at the end where they talk about oil coming out of the ground instead of hunting down a whale to get oil. And if anyone's watching a TV show based in New York City, look at the background, or you might hear the reference to a brownstone building. So if you look at the background or buildings in New York City, you'll find the first 1.5 meters of the stonework is brown. And above that, it's that, concrete gray color. So why is that? So before the mass production of the car, everyone used horses. And you would have horses and carts going through New York City. What do horses do? Well, they crap everywhere. So they would crap on the streets of New York City. So if you're walking through the streets of New York City, you are smelling horse manure, and you're walking through it every day. At the end of the day, people would come down and sweep the horses to the side of the road. And what that would do, they'd sweep it up against the houses. So the bottom of the properties in New York City, in Manhattan, would look brown. Why? Because they're pelted with manure. So they started making them with brown stones, so you couldn't see it. You couldn't see the splash marks of the manure. When the car came out, it was a clean alternative. No manure, no walking in it, nothing is going to splatter against your home. This was the vehicle revolution. It got rid of the horse. So with EVs, they're getting rid of, or not getting rid of, but potentially getting rid of the fact that we're using petrol for combustion to propel a car. But petrol is heavily involved in everything that we do. And these protesters that are defacing these artworks, they're wearing petroleum-based products.
The podcast you just listened to was a live recording of a radio show, first broadcast on FreshFM, the top of the South's community access media station, with support from New Zealand On Air. The funding of Access Media makes these podcasts possible. To find similar programs by other community access media stations, go online to accessmedia.nz. If you or your group would like to know more about how you can have a program on our station, please contact us. Visit our website freshfm.net for our contact details.